The Lord be with you. Well, what is in your playlist right now? What are those things that you are listening to or watching or even reading now that we have digital ways to read things on devices? That's kind of the goal of this series of videos, is to talk about playlists, about those things that we plug in, that we play, that help us to get through the days, especially during these days of pandemic. So we want to talk about things that uplift us spiritually, those things that have some emotional compassion and that lift us and carry us, those things that help us psychologically with all of the things going on, just to be able to cope and be able to get through our days. So that's what we want to talk about. That's the kind of stuff that we want to share. And because this one is a little more community oriented, a little more accessible for those people outside of the normal circles that we've been putting these videos in, then we ask you to do the normal YouTube type stuff. Subscribe to the channel, click on the thumbs up, click on the bell for future notifications. Feel free to comment below. And if you are accessing this through the Facebook page at Zion Church, then feel free to share it also with others who you think it might be valuable for. So in the first volume of this pandemic playlist, we introduced a movie and got some interesting feedback. I know lots of you watched it. I hope that was an interesting experience, and again, maybe expands our horizons or reminds us of stories that are out there that we saw a while ago and are good maybe to connect with and reconnect with during these times. For this particular volume, I want to introduce a song. So the song that I'm going to recommend for our pandemic playlist is The Blue Train by Linda Ronstadt. Now, before you jump into any conclusions, either by hearing the name of the song or the name of the artist, let me give you some backstory to this. So this probably occurred towards the end of the summer, maybe the beginning of fall. I was driving home one day, and this song just came on the radio. And it was such a powerful blast from the past for me. This is a song that I hadn't heard in years. I'd kind of forgotten about. So it was good from a nostalgic point of view. It's sort of a walk down memory lane. But also, I was struck again by the lyrics and the format of this particular song. So if you don't know, this comes from an album from 1995 by Linda Ronstadt called Feels Like Home. The Blue Train was the first single off of that album, so that also came out in early 1995. I would have been in college at the time when this first started playing on the radio and the video was on TV. And for some reason, it really captured me, which is interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is not your typical college style music. It's not a party song. It's not a dance song. It's a very slower paced ballad of sorts. Also interesting because Linda Ronstadt is not a cutting edge new artist. Even back in 1995, she had been putting music out since the end of the 1960s. So not her first album, not her first foray into music, certainly not something that should have been on the college radar. But what I think really stood out to me and connected with me in 1995 from this song is it's kind of a good transitionary song. It's a breakup song, a song about a broken heart. And it has a lot of melancholy to it. But it sort of reminded me and maybe struck a chord with me because those early college years, there was a little bit of that melancholy, that lament over the end of youth, and still kind of some hopeful beats for what adulthood was bringing, just the solidification of adulthood. So that's kind of what I was experiencing at the time. When you are young, when you are youthful, everything's possible and anything can happen in the future. And as you start to transition into adulthood, things become more concrete and therefore more limited. And you just sort of have to come to terms with where you are. You need to say goodbye to the past so that you can welcome the future. And there is a little bit of lament with that. There is a little bit of heartache with that. So the song itself has very interesting lyrics to it. There are a lot of these visual metaphors, very strong poetic metaphors, but they're very disconnected. They don't necessarily tell a coherent narrative. They just give you little glimpses, little vignettes into things that are wrong, things that are broken. And a lot of the imagery just revolves around this lonely train ride. So the chorus is, I'm riding the blue train over the miles yet to cover, a ghost in a hurry to fade. I'm taking it one way to nowhere, afraid you might be there to find me inside this blue train. And it's such an interesting paradox because in one sense, she seems to be acknowledging that this broken heart has left her so devastated, she just wants to get away from everything. She wants to go to a place where there's nothing else. If she were in terms of a ghost, an emotional ghost, she's in a hurry to fade. She just wants to transition to the next thing. But her ultimate fear and kind of the thing that doesn't allow her to completely grieve or to grieve well is the fact that she just doesn't want to meet the person from that relationship, wherever the destination of this supposed train is taking her. That to her is unthinkable and undesirable and very, very fearful to her. So musically, it is just an interesting piece of music. It's rather slow in tempo. The bass line is just so great in this song because it brings out so much hope in it, which is interesting. Bass, that's the instrument that you feel. You feel it in your chest. Sometimes it carries you even if you're not registering it in your ears. And this has an ascending bass line. It keeps you, especially in the chorus, in this movement towards there's something better coming. And yet the other instrumentation is just very dreamlike. Linda Ronstadt's vocals are very haunting. So it leaves you this incredible combination of feelings. Like I said, kind of melancholy mixed in with a sense of hope. There's a great bridge to the song with some soaring background vocals in it, which were provided by Emmylou Harris and Dolly Parton. So again, some big names associated with the song if you come from that kind of genre. And I think the reason it struck me as particularly relevant for the pandemic is because I think so many of us are experiencing things in fragments. There isn't this whole, there isn't this universal experience. There isn't even this straight trajectory for each one of us individually. There's a little bit of good and a little bit of bad. There's a little bit of starting and a little bit of stopping, a little bit of reconnection and disconnection going on. So the lyrical style, that fragmentation style, sort of matches, I think, life right now for many of us. But also, lyrically, that somber feeling of being blue, riding this blue train, being on a journey where we don't control the destination, we don't really know where the destination is going, but we kind of wish that this past would just sort of get over with. All of us are kind of going through some kind of grief and sorrow. Yes, some people have it much more intensely than others, but even those of us who are sort of unscathed at this point by COVID-19, either because we haven't experienced job loss or the death of a loved one, or maybe even the own limitations of our own health, even those of us who are not suffering as much as others are suffering are still suffering. I mean, there is still sorrow, there is still grief, and we need to sort of know how to process that. And sometimes a good song just gives the right mood to release some emotions. But like I said, this one is still oriented somehow towards hope. It just feels rather hopeful to me while still acknowledging the brokenness that we're going through. So that's my recommendation. Give the song a look. You certainly can search it up on YouTube. You can find it. You can listen to it on YouTube. Comment below. Let me know what you thought about it. If you've ever heard it before. If you hadn't heard it in a long time like me and were re-hearing it. Let me know if you didn't like it. Let me know if it's not your style of music. And if you have any suggestions for songs or movies or books that have been particularly relevant for you during this time of pandemic, please put those in the comments as well. We're going to keep revisiting these. We're going to keep making suggestions to help us journey together in hopeful, helpful, cultural ways, even as we're praying for an end to this sooner rather than later. So in these days of ongoing pandemic, may the peace of God be with you. Amen.